Or is this, if we're talking about the world of construction and architecture and places, is this not kind of building information modelling? Well, yeah, the answers are yes, sort of, and guess what? Yes, sort of. So we need to position where we are on a digital twin journey that's perspective of where we could go versus the reality of where we are. And there's later on in the story that I'm telling there, we'll touch on something called the maturity index, which has come from Atkins, which they've now given to the world, and that was part of the paper on digital twins in the built environment that I was a participant in. The other irony, and of course Phil would say he had this planned right from the get-go, is that this week for Tech UK is Digital Twin Week. Did you know that, Phil? Of course you did.
Yeah, I've been standing outside the house clapping for Tech UK for that very reason.
So, and the other irony is that today's focus is on resilience. And then one of the stories that we'll touch upon in a few minutes is actually a journey that we've been doing, a project that my company KnowNow have been involved in, which is called Crunch, and resilience. It's all about resilience. So I love the serendipity that you've created here, Phil. So it's awesome. So if you can prepare the next slide, please, darling, that'd be great. Sorry, I called you darling, not Debbie. Thank you. So where do you start? So the key thing is about saying, as a developer, building owner, asset owner, I can't just magic up a digital twin. I need some kind of framework, something to hang my ideas or my outcomes or what I want to do. And so this was recognised, and the Centre for Digital Built Britain at the University of Cambridge has come up with the Gemini principles. The CDBB was established in late 2018. It's a mixture of the greater good, a multidisciplinary community that's coming together to identify and predominantly focused on a national digital twin project, which is about creating a digital rendering of life in the UK as we know it. But the principles here are really important. And for me, when I look back at when Paul and I first met, talking about smart city interoperability frameworks, and we were very keen to embed what does good look like and what are the principles. Some of those in that standard that we wrote 9+ years ago are still consistent threads here. And when you look back at Brett's story and look at these principles, you'll go, they're uncannily aligned. And this is what gets me excited about what you hear about Fawley, is that we are creating something that applies to the principles, but also is going to deliver something of value. If you have any argument about these principles and digital twins, please don't argue with me. Go and argue with the Centre for Digital Built Britain. They've got more money, more budget, and cleverer people than I am. But I would argue that these are really important, because if you go away from these, so you don't do things in the public good, you're not creating value, you're being closed and not open, the success factor of your digital twin will be somewhat mitigated. And everything must have a purpose. You must be trustworthy, and you must function effectively. Otherwise, the business benefits you're expecting to realize from your digital twin will be underwhelming. And that's why they're key and they're front and center. So if you are embarking on a digital twin adventure, or someone starts talking to you, just say Gemini principles, and they'll either have wavy lips or they go, yeah, totally, I buy into it, and this is how we apply by it. And it's on that answer that you should then start talking seriously to someone else. So we've understood the principles. I've got this great project. It's all open, it's trusted, and it's got function and purpose. Fantastic. So next slide, please. We then come on to what we call the maturity matrix. As I said, I was part of a team that wrote a paper for the IET of digital twins, and the idea of this paper, and links at the end of these decks, is to just kind of get through some of the marketing kludge of what's happening in the marketplace, because everyone's talking about it, but what do we really mean by it? And our friends at Atkins, who are the sponsors of the paper, gifted us this maturity index. And for me, what I really liked about the maturity index, it was kind of saying that I can call something a digital twin, but actually my twin's slightly different to your twin because I'm more mature or less mature than you. And the other thing is that no one is at level 5. You know, that autonomous, all-knowing, all self-thinking, automatic responding thing that we would love to put up into our future worlds. Most of us are probably at 0 or 1. But where we have a competitive advantage about to be gifted to us is we've got a brand new site being created and a new smarter place being born, where we could have a bigger ambition that for certain parts of this, the digital twin maturity shouldn't be a 1 or a 2. It could be moving into the 3, 4s, and even the 5s. And the other thing that we need to recognize as well with our digital twins is that you can have different levels of maturity even within an urban space. So for example, your building sitting on a square, the building could be more mature in its digital twin journey than the square is. The square is just promoting information around air quality. It's not being autonomous and shutting things down. It's just going, hello, I'm here and I'm a square and I've got great weather and good air quality. The building may be a little bit smarter in that it's using information to provide a better living environment. The bus that's sitting on a transport network, that itself could also be a digital twin, just-in-time travel. The bus could be at autonomous level 5 and be incredibly mature. So all of these interfaces and all this sharing of information within the twin need to be borne in mind when we're thinking about digital twins. So my message would be, don't beat yourself up if your twin's not autonomous from day one. No one was. We've had to learn and go on a journey. And that journey will evolve over time. But of course, what we can do with Fawley Waterside is potentially expedite that journey and get to a destination a little bit faster. Next slide, please. So KnowNow have been involved in a project led by the University of Portsmouth for the last 2 years. It's called the Crunch, or the Food, Water, Energy Nexus. What this means is it's about trying to understand the convergence of information that you act upon, the nexus point between the systems of food, water and energy in an urban space. It's an EU-funded project that has partners from Taipei through to Miami. The UK representative is South End. Don't laugh, they've got some big problems around water encroachment. Not as big as Miami's though, where they're having to deal with water encroachment from the sea, but not because it's coming at them in waves, but it's coming at them from the ground because of the geology of Miami. But what is the point of this project? Well, in effect, we're creating a decision support model. It's a digital twin. It's there to provide city leaders and citizens, and this is one of the other key things about the project, is around how it puts the citizen front and centre, to help drive the conversation and saying, look, change is about to happen. You're going to have an impact on water. What are you going to do? What are the options? And you can use the twin to explain and drive a conversation that leads you to make a sensible decision, because it's based on either real-time or modelled information. And what the project is there to do is to create a series of urban living labs, test different models and find out what works and what doesn't. We are really early and young and immature in some of our, not just the collation of data, but how we use that to drive our decision making. So the team is vast. There's 36 partners. There are a large number of people and a range of academics, from social scientists, economists, to ecologists, environmentalists, to computer scientists, right through to planners and architects as well. and it's a really exciting project. And the role that we're providing is the data management framework, and trying to compel the parties to play nice together and design on one common set of principles. Yes, those Gemini ones, to a standard space. Yes, Paul, that is PAS 181, the interoperability framework, and more importantly, delivering open, transparent, sustainable, and citizen-centric outcomes that allow business leaders, citizens, and community leaders to make the right decisions that are fit for their world, based on what the digital twin is telling them. You've had enough from me, so I'm now going to hand you over to Brett, who's going to tell you about Fawley Waterside and the exciting things they're up to. And then after that, you'll hear from me and Paul to weave how we can get digital twins up and running in Fawley. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Chris. I'd like to thank Phil and Chris for inviting me, first off. I really don't know many of the people here, and it's a delight to say hello to you all. And the first thing I'd like to say is, going forward, when we reopen Fawley Waterside, we'd be delighted to welcome you down to see it. I know some of you are local. I think Chris mentioned he was earlier, and you know, if you'd like to come and see us, I'd be delighted to welcome you to Fawley. My background is I speak quite a lot, and I was quite worried to speak to you guys because I thought lots of techies here, and I'm not a techie at all. I'm just a person that, you know, kind of largely speaks for a living. I had the good fortune, though, to invest in quite a lot of technologies. I think a couple of the guys, Robert and his partner, invest in technologies and had some success and not often success, but some success to the extent I sold a business to Apple in 2010 when I was at Sigma Capital and retired. And I used to look at technology and think, you know, what can I make? What can it do? Can it achieve something different? Can it enable better quality of life? Or can it make a product that we can sell and offer some advantages? And that kind of worked, and that's kind of been how I thought about this, really. And having spent 12 years as a marketing director of a Formula One team, I mentioned to the guys earlier, I'm not putting the car together. Paul and others like yourselves will. I'm just working with Aldred Drummond as the monkey in this relationship. He's the organ grinder, and I'm just largely looking to help formulate how this project will pan out. I met Aldred because of some work that I had done with the EM3 LEP. They'd asked me to take a look at Whitehill and Borden and put some vision behind it. But what I quickly realized after a few months of looking at it was that I was 12 years too late, because they'd already appointed the property developers. And what I soon found out was that property developers just want to, you know, largely build something and then bugger off with the cash. And I said, look, I can't pull this together. I can't create a village of the future. I can't work with Apple and others, and IBM actually. I put Andy into it. I realized that I couldn't actually make it work. And I said to Jeff French, the chairman of the EM3 LEP at the time, and John Coughlin, the chief executive, Hampshire County Council, I'm out. And they said, look, you know, we'd like to keep your skills in Hampshire, because I was only interested to do this in Hampshire. And they said, have you met Aldred Drummond? And I hadn't. And, you know, I knew where Fawley was, but I didn't know too much about it other than looking at it from the waterside. And of course, when I was in the New Forest from a distance. So I knew very little about it. I had the good fortune to meet with Aldred coming up to 4 years in August. And between us, we kind of agreed we liked each other and we shared a similar vision, because basically Aldred and his family, the Drummond family, have been in Hampshire going on for nearly 300 years after they got bashed up at the Battle of Culloden and came second, and lost their titles, but started Drummond's Bank and bought 3,000 or more acres in Hampshire and have lived here ever since. And Aldred Drummond and his family would like to leave a legacy of sustainability. And that was very attractive, because it meant that we could actually create something from below ground up, which was a very rare thing. And so I went away for a couple of months, and I created with Aldred what we refer to as the Intelligent Merchant City. And the reason we called it that was we thought the word smart was a little bit overused. There's a lot of smart projects in the world, but I thought it was a bit like Timberland. It was a bit of a brand that could have made it, but actually didn't, because it was a bit tainted by the fact that there was a lot of smart projects going on in the world, but they couldn't parts of the world or in different towns or different cities. But I kind of questioned that, because we've been retrofitting technology for a long time, which is an admirable thing as long as it enables better quality of life. And I recognize that there is legacy issues and governance issues and legal issues, et cetera, but I thought if we could actually build something from below ground up, and building the digital framework and the, if you like, the digital network as well, and the stack, that we might be able to deliver that better quality of life, both physically and in the digital world. I thought this would be a good thing to do in one place. So I just preferred the word intelligent. And intelligent really is about the use of technology and the deployment of technology, but only when it comes to enabling a better quality of life. The way I think about it is largely, if you've got a light bulb in a room and you've got a big window and it's sun shining all day, do you need the light bulb? You know, in other words, if you don't need it, don't deploy it and don't design it in. But if you do need it, then absolutely use it to the best of its ability, thinking about the internet as the fourth utility. You know, because I come from a place in Greenford, where I was born, where, you know, we didn't have access to electricity. We didn't have the ring main in those days. And and then I know people from 1976 that didn't have water. Then that came along, access to water and inside bathrooms and things, and then access to gas. And now we've got the internet. And of course, we don't have ubiquitous internet. And we're also working on that as well at Fawley, to actually get, or make us, and make the Western Waterside the most connected place on earth. I'm talking about ambition here, guys, and I'm talking about things I'm kind of making up, not necessarily really will happen. We're aspiring to make these things happen, but hopefully we will. So what the city aspect of the intelligent merchant city, so the merchant aspect rather, is about purpose, because it was very important that we think about job creation. We think about bringing back hope and belief for young people. We think about bringing back jobs into a part of the country where it's very expensive to live, but there aren't a lot of jobs to support it, and there aren't a lot of sustainable jobs. So we're looking to create 2,000 to 2,500 jobs, and every job is honorable, but we're looking to create some high level, high value, sustainable jobs. And we've got some themes, and those themes are largely around, as you would suspect, and I can't go too much into it for a lot of reasons, which we can't explain right now. But the themes are largely around maritime and, of course, agile technologies, or in other words, digital. But of course, there would be obviously service jobs as well, and growing fish, aquaculture, horticulture, et cetera, and I'll come on to that a little bit later. The merchant, though, as I say, is about job creation. That is about purpose. And the city is because I believe that it's a city scale. If you think of merchant cities of the past, you think of Venice, Dubrovnik, cities in the south of France, or even our own Southampton. It was 100 acres. And we are 400 acres in total. We're 150 acres of build, 2.5 million square feet of residential, and 1.5 million square feet of commercial. So we have a mixed use community, and I use some, I think, pretty decent phrases. And one of that is, and Chris used the citizen-centric element, that we're looking to build a whole life knowledge-based citizen-centric community. So in other words, if we actually put the as much fiber that we know into the ground as we can, we can pretty much do anything we like in terms of what the digital aspect might look like as we know it. So, and you can see from this slide here, and I'm only using 3 slides, this slide here, that we're looking to build a very beautiful place. It's going to be connected, but we want it to be the most beautiful small town in England, really. That is one of our aspirations and ambition. If you can click on, please, Phil, that'd be helpful. Yeah, so I wrote this slide um, uh, and delivered it basically around October 2016. So it's a little bit tired, but I still like it because it pretty much sums up everything that we're looking to do, or I'm looking to do, or was looking to do. But I wrote a small slide deck of 5 so I could bring people like Cisco, Siemens, IBM, Vodafone, BT, Southern Water, 20 university partners, etc. We needed to know a little bit about what we were talking about. I sat with a good mate of mine who now works totally for the government on 5G and whatever we want to call that, AI, IoT, 5G. But we wrote this in my drawing room and we came up with hundreds of slides and we tried to get it down into a decent deck of 4 or 5, because basically we need to look at every touch point of life. You know, every touch point of life is in change right now because of the digital future that we're transitioning it into. So I just called it intelligent living in a digital future, because that's what I believe we're looking at. But we're leading, interestingly enough, with human capital, which is about job creation. We're leading as well with the fact that we want to make it a beautiful place, a community, and a place where people can afford homes, and we will also be providing them with jobs. And I'd look to you as a group to help us do that. And of course, it's in a beautiful place. We can't help the location. We live in the Bay Area. The business I sold was to Apple, and I had the misfortune to spend quite a lot of time in America. And I got to understand the Bay Area quite well. And we've got our own. If you think of the horseshoe between ourselves and Southampton and the Isle of Wight, it's pretty much a benign Bay Area. So it means that we can do lots of testing. It's an exemplar site for land, sea, and air testing and testing technologies and testing kit. So it's a whole raft of things that we're actually looking to do. And I mentioned every touch point of life. Before I get into that, the preservation of nature is hugely important, because we do live on a waterfront, and we've declared a number of different things we like to do. Chris touched on earlier about water, you know, and we're as a world under pressure with water, and it's very important that some of the things we've done, we've declared the fact that we only want to use 85 liters of drinking water per person per day instead of 140. We can be using water for all sorts of things like irrigation, etc., and obviously for other uses. But we've also said that we would like to design out unavoidable plastic. I even have the aspiration, working with RHS Wisley and with Paul Hogg-Weisstein, University of Royal Holloway, looking at things like horticulture, and even thinking of the detail of the types of grass we might use. If I brush my hand against it, does it make me feel good? And despite having the most intelligent, the smartest, if you like, city or small town that we can imagine, I would still like it to have some quiet zones and have the sound of water and have shared spaces and build this real community, 5,000 souls, and obviously we're not even considering yet the amount of visitors that it might attract. But the point is, we have a lot of opportunity to do something that's really great and really good. The other thing in terms of sorry, am I running out of time, Phil?
No, I pressed the wrong button. Apologies.
Okay, mate. Just quickly, we're also looking to, if you like, become self-sustainable in food. As I say, these are actions and ambitions, and because we've got 7 kilometers of underground 2.5 meter square tunneling, we can be working with people like Signify and others and our university partners to grow fish sustainably, ethically, morally, and then to look at horticulture. In other words, to make ourselves self-sustainable, and then linking that to transport, like AVs, drones, air taxis, and how we might logistically deliver that food, unpackaged, send out fresh food as far as the port of Southampton, getting it onto cruise ships, getting it onto container ships, delivering across to Portsmouth, Southampton, the Isle of Wight, etc., etc. We have that level of ambition. And then we've got another 600 acres where we're creating a national reserve, which is we're bringing in a saline lagoon into the site, or at the southern end of the site, beyond where people might live. But it will allow us to, again, grow fish in that, look at oysters and things of this nature. And it's also there for the community to enjoy. And please be assured that when I refer to community, I refer to all of us, because I think that the New Forest can open up to opportunities to an awful lot of other people. We have this very rare thing that we're able to do together, and that we can all collectively aspire to. And I don't pretend to have all the answers.
Brett,
The thing quickly.
Sorry, Brett, can I ask a question?
Yeah, who's that?
It's Phil, sorry.
Okay.
Obviously, Fawley from a road network perspective isn't great.
No.
And so is the intention to effectively employ all the people who live in Fawley on the Fawley site, and therefore reduce the amount of need to commute away from the site? Or is there some other sort of solution? We're going to use the water. What's the...
Yes, I'll come on to transport in a second. Yeah, all of those things.
Okay.
But if I just may cut along to eco-intelligence, what I mean by that is it's basically thinking about everything, including the digital aspect, as paramount, because I see that as being important, of securitization of data, which the guys will talk about, particularly Paul, who's absolutely monstrous ambition of this and got the knowledge to actually do it. You know, it's something that we need to consider. In fact, if you like, a phrase that Paul uses all the time called privacy by design. We need to design the digital future, the data, if you like, within the site, just as important as we need to use the materials. And in fact, one of the things that we're doing just slightly off-site is we're growing our own building. We're literally growing it from the wood that's on Aldrid's estate. But interestingly enough, the tenant will be Unity, which is the world's biggest gaming company. So it's about eco-intelligence, thinking about all the materials, all the transport solutions, the health solutions, the energy solutions, how we might develop sustainable food, you know, looking at road, rail, sea, air. So I've had ambitions, just focusing, if I may, Phil, to answer your question on transport. You know, I've had the misfortune, if you like, and the good fortune to own a number of cars, and some have been sensible and some haven't. But I do think that, you know, cars have become simply unaffordable for the world. And I'm not particularly an evangelist on this, but I do think it's important to think about other solutions. And we have the good fortune, as I say, to be surrounded by water. And as an Englishman, you know, and having some experience in other parts of the world and having had a house in France for a number of years, why don't we use the water? Why don't we use the water more? And so we've been testing water taxis. In fact, we got a water taxi, which we've got from Phil Williams at Williams Shipping. We run it between ourselves and the Isle of Wight for one of our tenants, MHI Vestas. We've been looking at drones. We've been testing drones with University of Southampton and with Professor Paul Newman from Oxbotica. We've been testing AVs, both on the water, below the water, et cetera, et cetera. And I had the ambition to steal the Siemens EV aeroplane from one of our partners, from Jürgen Mayer, which I first saw at Goodwood, and said, can we put some skis on it? Because the battery life on this EV aeroplane was only 30 minutes. But if I've got a meeting with Marcus or Paul Holland or some of the other guys on the call and say, look, we can send the aeroplane over, 2 minutes, we can be back at Fawley Waterside. Now, how cool is that? As I say, these are ambitions. You know, and I'm a kid from the Jetson age, and, you know, which is why I don't think that we can be future-proof, but we can be future-ready. And what brought me to that was that, you know, I always wanted to be in a flying car, and I didn't actually go on one until the summer before last at Denham Airport, when I went on a PAL AV on a car designed by Pininfarina. And it was like a gyrocopter, but it was actually basically a flying car, which was a really cool thing. I'm not suggesting we could have flying cars at Fawley Waterside, because you need 65 feet to take off and land. But there are those massive ambitions to, yes, we've got to do something about the A326, and collectively we can work very hard to do that. There have been submissions to local government and to the Solar LEP to get those done. We won some money, which you may have seen, £6 million, which we've got a match fund to actually do some work on the lower A326. I mentioned to you, we've been testing drones. We want to be looking at water taxis. Yes, we want to bring back the Fawley Forester. And once we can actually get that back, we were running it, the train down from Southampton Central down to the gates of the Exxon power plant, sorry, down to the oil refinery. We would then invite you onto that train. But the ambition is to get that back, and we could have an EV train or whatever works, and then have a fully integrated ticketing system, because I think everything should be as fully integrated as we can make it. So it's about road, taking advantage of rail, taking advantage of sea, and if I had my ambition, right, to have air taxis as well. But I think that is some way off, and we can, if we can get the power ratio right with new technology, new hybrid engines, then we can get those skis off the ground and get those planes flying in the air. As I say, eco-intelligence is about everything that we might use as we build this from below ground up. And the rare thing is we can do it because we are designing in a man-made canal, because we have all this space underground. We also are designing in what people might refer to as a car park, but we refer to it as car storage, because we're not Freiburg, we're not draconian. There will be some cars on the surface and there will be some undercroft parking, but largely you would take your car and park it underground. We could then also have, we're ambitious in terms of how we use waste management, which we can use underground. So if anybody's been to Wembley, I urge you to go there and have a look at the NVAC solution, which is the one we are currently looking at. We're also, as I say, looking at autonomy. We're not like yet at number 5, which I know is Chris's ambition, but you know, we have been obviously looking with Ocado and Amazon at how we might do that, and then linking it to what we could grow at Fawley Waterside, or certainly on the Cadland estate, and in terms of, you know, working with the University of Southampton, Imperial College on growing fish, using maybe the fantastic experience of Singapore. So we have all those ambitions in terms of eco-intelligence. But future-proofing really is about using your brain power and the brain power of others to think about the type of technologies that's going to enable Paul and others to put this car together, if you like, this city together, in terms of using technology to enable better quality of life. But I just believe that we can be future ready. We may not be future proof because we, you know, 3 or 4 years, 20 years time, we may be mind reading, who knows? It might be, you know, not 5G, but 20G or some other G. And I believe that if we can get those 3 things right, we can get to the holy grail, which I refer to as sustainability, which is, I think, which was Audi's ambition when we sat down together. And it's what we think we have the opportunity, this rare opportunity in a place where people actually want to live, to do it. We can't do it alone. We can only do it in partnership, working with the third sector, because we are hugely interested in supporting natural capital. And to help us do that, we're working with a variety of professors led by Professor Dieter Helm, who you may have heard of from Oxford University. He's one of our leading environmental economists. It's thinking about how we use this rare earth that we have and using it as capital, and think of it as capital, a rare, precious element. We can only work, as I say, with the National Park Authority. We're part of Green Halo. Audi's lived there families lived there for hundreds of years. And so it is about protecting the nat and working with people to do that. And as I said, thinking about the water we use, designing unavoidable plastic, et cetera, the type of planting we might have. Does it make me feel good? All of that stuff I mentioned earlier. And we can only do that with, you know, the third sector and everybody else. You know, we'd like to welcome, you know, partners from the private sector, including yourselves. We can't do this alone. We do need some support from the public sector. That's both nationally and locally, with partners from regional government, Hampshire County Council, and of course the LEPs of this world, and particularly the Solent LEP. But also we need the brain power, and we're working with 6 local universities, and we're also working with, as a sector partner, with UK CRIC, which is led by Brian Collins as the convener and has 13 core university partners. and that stands for UK Collaboratorium of Infrastructure into Cities. And that literally touches on every touch point of life, and we've got the brains to help us do that, and we're working on all sorts of projects to do that. So it's about academia as well. So it's linking the third sector, private sector, public sector, and academia. If I just may have the last slide quickly. I'm sorry I'm rambling on here, but you can see this is, if you like, what we refer to, or what Aldred refers to and I refer to as Hampshire's version of Venice. And that's what we're looking to build. So in the center there, you'll see the dock, because it is a maritime city, a marine city. It's a working marine city. It won't just be a marina. There'll be lots of, as I say, knowledge going on within it. You can see, unfortunately, that the stackers will be gone. And we're going to be putting up a campanile, rather like the campanile in St. Mark's Square in Venice, but without flooding, we hope, because we are raising the site by over 1 meter. And you can see that we're largely going to be 4 or 5 floors. And the footprint that we have in the industrial quarter may be only 2 or 3 floors. You know, and the figures I gave you earlier, 2.5 million square feet, sorry, 1.5 million square feet of industrial space largely relies on just one footprint. But anyway, thank you for inviting me. I hope I've not been too long-winded and boring. Anyway, I'd love to welcome you to Fawley going forward, and hopefully some of you will be able to participate in what we're doing. So
just
I'd like
before
to.
we Brett, sorry, just before we pass over to Paul,
Yeah.
Is there any specific skills or services, or maybe it'd be covered by Paul, that you are looking for in terms of helping develop this concept?
That's too wide a question for me to answer.
Okay. All right.
Sorry. The answer is yes. You know, so again, if you think of the Formula One analogy, yes. You know, Formula One, we used to have 200 people when I was there. Now it's over 1,200. So I believe that technology will drive jobs, and therefore technology will drive knowledge. And I think that we can use as much knowledge as we can. I mean, really, I think the products and services, the upstream and the downstream products and services that will allow us to develop those 2,000 jobs at Fawley could be, and this, I think Debbie, Kat, and yourself, Phil, will really buy into this, is that we don't know what those products and services might look like, nor do we know what those skills might be. Hopefully by that time we'll have a pretty good idea. And if, as a theme, we are focusing around, as I say, maritime and there's been some agri-tech, but largely maritime in the agile world, yes, I think that we'll need lots of knowledge. So yeah, I'm sure that we will need some of your skills, and that we can meet with those businesses that might want to help us, and we'd be delighted to do that.
Great, thanks, Brett. Paul, you wanna, shall I go on to the next slide?
No, that is we're just going to leave it there because it's such an awesome image. But I'd like to introduce Paul, because Paul, can you just tell the audience a bit about your background, what you're doing with Fawley Waterside, and your side hustle that keeps you busy on the other side of the pond as well, because your background is very interesting. And then we'll ask a couple of questions and then open it up to the floor if you're okay with that.
Sure. So I've been working in sort of emerging technology, with the main part of my career being in telecoms, and little divergences into smart transport and smart cities, and more recently into artificial intelligence and data trusts. That's on the back of a non-technical start to life as a modern languages graduate and a bit of languages teaching in Southampton, actually, so I can be a card-stamped member of shit. And I then became a graduate trainee at the ripe age of 25 with ICL, and then moved to ICL in Reading, and then sidestepped into telecoms when I joined BT to do their decision support stuff, and they funded me to go and do an MBA in marketing at City Business School, and thence I set off into other stuff, including a strategy consultancy, a bit of time at Toshiba, and quickly found a decent gig at Nortel for 10 years, where I moved through various things and ended up running their European corporate development during the boom years of Nortel's rise to fame and subsequent plummet to destruction. And that's all nearly 20 years ago now. Since then, I've done quite a bit of mates consulting, like some of you are doing now, and then had a 7-year spell working for the Transport Research Laboratory, which I thought would be handy because I'm in Bracknell and they were down the road in Crowthorne. And within weeks of doing that, I found myself running setting up their Middle East region and going to Dubai every 2 or 3 weeks, which was actually really good fun. And then I found myself looking for a consortium to bid the first autonomous vehicle project with what's now the UKRI. And I was looking for a local authority, and I was digging around, chatting to someone in Leeds as it happened, and they suggested going to Greenwich, the Royal Borough of Greenwich in East London. And I found a smart city team, which was looking like a very good gig, and I persuaded them that I should work for them rather than Tyrrell before we started the project, and had a very happy 4 years there. And then from there, nearly about 18 months ago now, a bit longer, went in 2 different directions. One is to get involved in Fawley, who I'd met through mutual smart city colleagues, and had met Brett and had been down and seen what was going on and seen what an exceptional project it was. And also in another smart city gathering, I've been over to Toronto, where Nortel was from originally, and I met a data trust company that specialises in data trust and AI called Sightline Innovation. And those 2 threads are coming together in being able to talk about multidisciplinary digital hubs, as we're sort of addressing today, and also the way that good data governance will result in smart digital hubs which can use AI-driven agents in order to understand better how resources and people will operate in a new and as yet unbuilt environment. This whole thing about the evolution of hubs of digital twins is well, it's very interesting how it's sort of been, put into layers. It's got a bit of sort of a consultant matrix about it, but I think the simple truth is that nearly all simulations are single silo, and if you're lucky, they look at growth over time, or maybe they're a static picture. And then occasionally people play tunes on 2 silos, like energy against occupancy, and you start to see interesting stuff. Where it all hits the wall of being too difficult is, I don't think it's a technical challenge. It's nearly always an organizational challenge, which is that large organizations, and especially local government organizations, are organized in silo structures, and trying to put in intelligent decision-making architecture that needs to be co-sponsored by multiple leaders is just trying to herd cats, really. That there's not enough motivation. It's too expensive up front with an uncertain outcome, and it sort of sounds like it's high risk, and it needs executive sponsorship. And I think it's slightly harsh, but I suspect reasonably fair to say that the art of a long and successful career in local government is to make sure you never take too many big decisions on your own, and to make sure that there's a committee of people who agree with you. And it's quite hard to get a committee to buy into a big digital twin project. I'm not saying that that's a bad model. In some ways, that's how the system has become resilient. It's just that it's a little bit resistant, to emergent technology. I'm aware that we're running a bit later than planned, and that's a sort of a bit more than an introduction. But I would just like to. I'm probably not going to get the time or the opportunity to say a great deal more. So I think I'll jump in at this point and just say that I think to answer the question earlier about how you might be involved, one thing that occurs to me about this very pleasantly mixed group of well connected digital knowledge workers is that it'd be very helpful to tap in to the membership that Phil and Chris have brought together in terms of being a user community for the digital workers and the tenants, because you all have expertise in digital knowledge working in one form and another, by the nature of the group. And you're also obviously South Hampshire residents who, some of you go sailing and some of you play golf, which is exactly the sort of catchment that that qualifies you for sitting around in the marina having a gin and tonic. So I suggest that it's not an immediate thing, but I suggest that we just have a gentle sort of teasing connection that says, as we begin to think about the way that our institutional growth is there to serve the occupants, the residents and the tenants, that we might be in a position to tap you up to look at some of the use cases, which should initially be, very old tech, and then follow us on the journey into simulations and onwards into digital twins. So I'm not actually looking for you to rise up out of your seats and come forward, but that if that opportunity is of interest, then I'll make sure that we come back and have another trawl. Does that give you a sort of something to work with, Chris? I think we're supposed to be having a discussion at this point.
Paul, awesome, absolutely awesome. I've got one question for you, which is we articulated the Gemini principles and the relative maturity of digital twins.
Yeah.
Where you're standing now, and we've both worked on the Nirvana side, and you're now working in the coalface. Where do you see the 1 to 100 digital twins that Fawley Waterside might generate? Where do you think they will start? And in the next, the first few phases, I don't want to put a timeline on it, but what would be your ambition of how people would use those digital twins? And I'm assuming there'll be more than one, which may already be the wrong assumption. So please shoot that down if I'm barking the truth.
I have a quite polarized view on this, and this is just a view, and it doesn't come with Fawley corporate branding at all, but it's a bit of a continuing interest I've had for the past few years. What I think is going to make this happen is the creation of a new class of enterprise business activity, which will be based around the value of data streams that are harvested from activity, business activity and social activity. There's a lot of work done, particularly in the past 18 months, on how social media companies have become the most valuable companies in the world by exploiting what they would call data surplus. And I think the market opportunity now is to start winding back in that data surplus and applying it more carefully. So instead of the big social media companies taking stuff that is a byproduct of your chat and then selling back the market insights, which then drive the adverts that you look at, and the only benefit to you is you're being advertised to. There is the technology, first of all, to do, as Brett mentioned, privacy by design, and particularly for people to consent to their data with an active informed consent, where they know what they're doing. Then there's the technology, which is a sightline thing, which I'll happily speak about another time, and have a look at sightlineinnovation.com if you're interested. And that's a mediated trust structure where you can use blockchain contracts to drive the consent and to specify what returns you want, either money or benefits, from sharing your data. And it works with IT, and it works with personal data and everything, and with financial services. The other key ingredient in this little sort of pie that becomes a very my vision is that this becomes a way of doing business, is that the data that comes off a development if it is well architected from a digital point of view, has better integration value. So think of that as being like a provenance quotient or an integration quotient or accountability, a good wine, if you like. And it allows you to understand much more efficiently the integration of all the services and experience that the citizens have. And if you're going to play an AI algorithm into that, you're going to get a more reliable view because it's better constructed and you can understand what's going on. That creates a revenue stream at the back end of a big development like Fawley. Now, I think the aha thing in terms of how this makes money and goes out into the market is there is an increasing understanding amongst some very big investors, some sovereign wealth funds and hedgy sort of people, that data is inherently undervalued and it's been a surplus for too long. So there's some significant capital out there that is interested in acquiring data assets and critically data concessions of things that that already exist or are going to be made. So I'm talking about the data that comes off the back of an operation. Where it gets interesting is if that data can not only be monetized, but it can be securitized so that it creates a tradable value that can be used to build it. So you're actually doing exactly the same asset financing as we all probably have experienced with, certainly if you've worked for IBM and Cisco, you've done asset financing till you blew in the place. So it's exactly the same thing, but the product this time is the actual data. So you're raising digital asset finance against a future data stream that will be monetizable. And what that gives you is an early pot of money to build things like digital twins and to design proper data architecture. And that's not happening at the moment, largely, I think, because the planning environment we're in will look closely at your environmental impact and your traffic impact and what roof tiles you're using and all the rest of it and your sustainability print. It has virtually nothing to say about your digital architecture, your IoT strategy, your privacy strategy, your plans for running your data responsibly. And if that changes by disruptive entrepreneurs coming in and funding that early stage of activity, then I think that model will become a competitive must-have for people doing new developments. And what I'd like to do is put Fawley at the very front of that queue, and then replicate that knowledge in a new code that serves developers who don't know how to do it.
Yeah, this is Brett. Thanks, Paul. I'm sorry that I took up a lot of your time, mate. One of the things I'd like to say is that I learned a lot from Paul, by the way, guys, and I'm worried that he's going to give too much of our secrets away. But the way I think about this in marketing terms is that we're looking to develop a better place, a better Britain, and then a better planet. In other words, I said at the start that what we're looking to do is something that's replicable, and that is both the physical aspects of what we're doing and the data aspect of what we're doing. So the Intelligent Merchant City in the UK, and certainly in Southern Hampshire, which is the important bit, I believe, for all of us, and certainly for me, is that it's replicable. We're learning about what it feels and what it might be to develop a better place. We can replicate it in other cities and other towns of the UK for Better Britain. And then as part of this large JV, this group of knowledge-based investors, if you like, or people that want to work with us on this, then of course we can replicate it on behalf of UK PLC for our country, despite Brexit and all the aspects of a global planet, which of course I do live in. Sorry, Paul, carry on.
No, so Brett, that was awesome. Paul, thank you. That was some really, really good points there. Because we were at the top of the hour, and we said we'd get the community on the call to pitch in with questions, and I'm tired of hearing my voice. I open up the floor. Phil, what questions are there, and who do you want to target? And I imagine most of them will be to Brett and Paul, to be honest, because I know I would take this opportunity to ask some questions. Go for it, guys.
I've
Phil will moderate.
I've got 2 questions myself, and then people just come off mute and wade in. And if we get into a slanging match, then we'll have to. I'll dive in with the mute button. But one question, probably to Brett actually. What are the timescales for you seeing this vision come to fruition? Just headline practical question.
Yes, we anticipate outline planning in the summer. I'm sorry, I'm just using the summer. It's a broad brushstroke because of actually, again, where we are. We're hoping that some of the work can, of course, be done virtually. We're working on how the public consultations might work. But I personally have a target that we should have a building out of the ground, a commercial building of some kind. So I do urge you to come and establish business at Fawley Waterside by the middle of 2021. But in terms of fruition, I won't be here to see the end of it. But it doesn't bother me. I just know that there'll be other great people coming along, and maybe some of those that are currently 16-year-olds in Debbie's college that are going to drive and make this wonderful, rare opportunity happen. So timescales, it's 25 years. Certainly, our ambition is that we'll get something out of the ground very, very quickly in the next 2 years.
Wow, okay, brilliant.
And temporary buildings are possible. I'm quite keen on incubator structures. There's potentially some money around. So, and you're a very well networked bunch of people. This is all a lead in to the concept of the shit shed.
You're going to use that brand now, Paul, aren't you?
I will. Yeah.
URL.
that is brilliant. No, thank you.
Second question, again, sort of probably more practical. For people living there, and it might be a question to Paul actually, clearly the whole purpose of this is to be quite, I'm using the wrong phrase because I'm new to this, but fairly heavily monitored. You're living in a community where the intelligence around you is pretty much watching what you're doing and reacting appropriately.
I don't agree with that.
Okay, so the question is that right? And the second question is, if it's sort of vaguely right, are there any, being a resident there, do you need to sort of factor that into anything you sign off on, or?
Well, yeah, my view, and it's again personal, is that if you're in a shared use building with multiple tenants, it's really quite important that only a very small proportion of those people choose to sort of black out themselves and not take part in collective intelligence systems, and I'd prefer none at all. In terms of private residential units that aren't shared in terms of any of their services, it's dilutive, but it's just irritating if people want to come and live in Fawley, but they don't actually want to do the intelligent merchant stuff, or particularly the intelligent stuff. So I would hope that we would be able to market the property in such a way that we attract people who see that as positive, because otherwise it's a bit like people coming on a cruise and saying, "Ooh, the ground's moving." It's sort of get a grip. This is what we do.
Yeah. I'd also argue that we're being monitored to a high degree anyhow, just by using your mobile phone. Someone knows your location. But it's also about giving you, and you mentioned the stuff you got with Sightline and the privacy by design.
Yep.
And it's giving you the opportunity to say, I'm consenting to this bit of data being used for this purpose.
Yes.
And if you can, going back to your point around the monetization piece, and yes, you're right, it's about marketing. It's about changing the nature of the conversation. I will get some benefit because I do X, and if you're a Waze user for with Google, you get a better, more accurate prediction of your journey because you're part of a community sharing incidents on the road, and that gives you the 10-minute headwind that no one else has. That 10-minute might be the difference between arriving an hour late or not at all.
Yeah, exactly. It's utilization. So on a micro scale, it's being able to go down to get a pizza and there being a table, and how does that happen if you haven't booked it, and what are the dynamics of that, and how can you influence people to just spread things out? On a more immediate challenge, if you're doing social distancing on trains next week,
Yes.
how do you avoid people turning up and crowding the platforms? Or if you say to people it's okay to go out and drive. I was just reading the news feeds today. I mean, the Cornish beaches are absolutely logjammed with people crowding to get on. How do you organise that so that you balance supply and demand, bearing in mind that physical pinch points are a real hazard at the moment? It's an unusual situation, but it's a good example of the way that you actually need intelligent flow management rather than just saying queue here, because you don't want people to even turn up until there's an opportunity for them, whether it's a train or a restaurant.
Remember though, Chris and guys, that Paul has used the phrase privacy by design, which I use all the time now. I don't pretend entirely to know what it understands, but what I do know is the outcome is that, for me, it's about to ensure that data, and if you like, an AI, which is what we're talking about really, is it works for people and society. So it is supportive of this community, and it will enable, I believe, this security to live better. And I think, Chris, you just said, about carrying mobile phones and debit cards and things of that nature. People know entirely where we are to a certain extent. What we're trying to do is, there's some IBM guys here. And when I first sat down with Andy 4 years ago and Dame Wendy, I said to Wendy and to Andy flippantly, because I'm naive, but I am ambitious, just build me an ethical and moral internet. And I know we're not going to be able to do that. I'm not talking about looking at porn and all that malarkey. But what I'm talking about is I'm talking about how we actually use that data, as I say, to use my phrase, which is to enable better quality of life, to actually learn from it collectively, but also within this community, which we then, I believe, if we do this well, then as I say, we can replicate it. Sorry, Paul.
Not at all. I need to wind up in a minute, actually. I'm on Toronto time and got another gig just coming along.
I'd just add, though, Brett, that your ambition can be realised with technology that exists today.
Yes.
And the more important aspect is the one Paul raised around the organisational construct, so that investors can get the benefit of the bit that they put in. Yes. And what's exciting about what you're doing with Fawley Waterside is you're creating that ecosystem of stakeholders that will buy into it, bring the community along, and then they will create that demand as well as the supply being offered by the technology that already exists. And that is, and we're so close. We are so close to this. It's really exciting. So
two suggestions for further reading. If you want to know about privacy by design, that's a 5-minute task, and then you can be a world expert because it's very brief. Look up Anne Cavoukian, Cavoukian, and she was for 17 years the privacy commissioner in Ontario, and she wrote the principles of privacy by design. There's about 7 of them, and it's a fact. That's as long as it goes. People have tried to turn it into something bigger, but it's one of those pleasing things where you can talk about the principles of privacy design and they're pretty obvious once you know what they are. On the other thing to do with the data economy, the other is a different sort of challenge, but I really strongly recommend a book called The Age of the Surveillance Economy by Professor Shoshana Zuboff, who's from Harvard. And that's a 500-page wedge that you can go and hide behind in the garden and last you most of the summer. But it's really, really interesting, particularly on the way that Google slowly eroded the boundaries of what was previously public data and turned it into corporate data.
Yeah,
and that's the process that's the process we're trying to reverse. And it's quite critical that we get the governance right before we move into AI-driven digital hubs. Otherwise, they'll be owned and managed by the people who own and manage the social media companies, and I don't think that's a good way to go.
Hence, the Gemini principles are a really good place to start, because that's where they're coming from.
But Chris, we're very lucky, I think, Paul, if I may just quickly remind everybody that Dame Wendy, who's one of our partners, because University of Southampton is, particularly Web Sciences Institute, I think she's now just been appointed chairman, Paul, isn't she, of the Ada Lovelace Institute, which basically for us is like looking in a mirror. Yeah, I've just looked them up, and I always say, to ensure that data and AI works for the purpose of society, and they're the deliberative body to allow that to happen. So,
Yeah.
you know, we seem to be working with the right people.
I'm going to have to go or take divorce points because I've booked dinner so I can get on and do my next call, and it's I haven't turned up when I said I would. As you, those of you who've been married nearly 40 years,
stay on for a few more minutes.
Will know that's a no-no.
Paul, can I just say thank you for your insight and your participation and great comments and story that you've just told. It's been brilliant. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.
Really appreciate it.
Hope to stay in touch with everyone and see you in a golf clubhouse one day soon.
or at Fawley.
Yeah.
On a boat, Paul. On a boat with the Maritime City.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Does
okay,
anybody
see you. We'll meet on a red funnel ferry, okay?
Or in a Fawley water taxi.
Has anybody else got any questions for Brett and Chris? Or should we wrap it up there? Anybody else got anything?
Thank you all.
No, yeah, okay. So in summary, if people are, if anyone's got any questions that they think of afterwards, please do get in touch. I'll forward them on. To repeat Chris's points, I mean, Brett and Chris and obviously Paul in his absence, thanks ever so much. That's really interesting. I mean, it's a slightly higher sort of intellectual plane than I'm used to. So it took a bit of chewing on, but it's fantastic, the project.
Thank you.
And yeah, in terms of the aspiration and the general sentiment, I mean, it's certainly something I'd love to get involved in somehow. I'd think about that. And I'm sure there are plenty of other people on the call who'd echo that. So, I mean, if everyone's happy for me to, get in touch with me and I'll share contact details if people are comfortable with that. And once I get the slides, I'll send them around so people can see the images that we've been looking at anyway.
But as I say, going forward, once we're out of lockdown, I'd be delighted to welcome all of you, the whole of the shit group, to see us at Fawley Waterside.
We'll have to get an electric boat over from the Rising Sun in Warsash, and we'll come through your docks.
And I'd love to come back with you for a beer. I can't wait to get the pubs open.
Brilliant. All right, guys. So like I say, any other questions, give us a shout.
Thank you all.
I'll facilitate them. Otherwise, have a lovely evening, and I'll see you probably in a couple of months.
Brett, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Phil. Cheers. Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Good night,
all.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Stay
Good night,
safe.
mate. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.